Hi everyone, in this video we will look at how to easily port content across two QuickSight accounts and how to leverage the QuickSight SDK to do this. On the screen I have two browsers open. On the left hand side, that's my source account. Herein I have created some assets. Let's start off with the datasets. I have one dataset which is powered by this QSCF data source, and there is a QSCF data set. I have one analysis that sits on top of this, and that analysis has been published as a dashboard here as well. So now we will see how we can move this dashboard and all the other assets to the target account. That's what I have open on this right hand side. So let's take a look at this and make sure that this is all empty. So if I look at data sets, there is nothing in here. Look under data sources, there are no existing data sources listed, no analysis, and no dashboards. Right? So it's a clean slate. Now I have set up a Jupyter Lab notebook here with the required code to move the content. I'll quickly go through that. Python is my language of choice, so I have set up this code using Python. QuickSight SDK is available in other programming languages as well, so you could choose the language that you work with. So in here I have set up a QuickSight full access role both on the source account and the target account, and the role with which this notebook is running, it's having trust relationship with both of these QuickSight roles, so it's able to assume those. So first on the source side we will assume that role, and then using that assumed role's credentials we will create a QuickSight client for the source account, and then we will repeat the same process on the target side. Let's go ahead and run this cell. Next we will make a describe data source API call against our QSCF data source. So let's go ahead and run that. We are printing the response here. So if you look at the response, we see that it's an S3 data source, and that under S3 parameters we have the manifest file location specified. Next we will run a describe data source permissions API to see what kind of permissions are applied to this on the source account. I see one item under the permissions list, and let's open that up. This one is my admin user right here, and for that admin user we have allowed this many QuickSight actions. So this is essentially full rights on the data source. Now using the information that we got from both of these API calls, we will see how we can create the similar data source on the target QuickSight account. Herein, one thing we are doing is for this principal, which was my user ARN, as you can see there is the account number specified in there. We are going to replace the source account ID with the target account ID, because I have a similar user, similar named user on the target side. And then I'm making a call to the create data source API, and in doing that I pass in the account ID of the target side, and then the data source ID. I can specify the same data source ID as I had on the source QuickSight account, because all these UIDs are unique per account and per region, so I am using the same one here. I specify the name, the type from the response object I got from my prior call itself. I also pass in the permissions, and in here this is the updated version where I replaced with the target account ID. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm getting a status 202, which means it's creation in progress. We can do a describe data source on the target side just to make sure it got created. Let's go ahead and run that, and it's giving me details of that data source now. So creation is successful. We can also look at the permissions, whether that got applied correctly. Just like we saw on the source side, there is one item here, and you can see it's the same user ID, but the account number has been replaced just like we did earlier. Let's look at this on the UI on the target side and see if this data source really got created. We can see here that QSCF data source has been created on the target side. So that's all good. Now let's move on to copying over the data set. Similar steps. I will first describe the data set. That gives us, we'll take a quick look at the data that's returned. The main elements here are the physical table map and the logical table map, which will have details of what kind of columns are there, whether we are applying any data transformation, so on and so forth. Right? Any renames being done, all that good information is available in this response. Like we did with the data source, we will next get the permissions applied on the data set, and then we will use information from both of those to run a create dataset command on the target side. Of course, we replace the source account ID with the target account ID here instead of doing this. You can see here in the create dataset API call, I'm passing in the physical table map, logical table map, and I'm directly referencing the similar components that I got from the source side describe. So it's quite easy if you're having links to both the source side and target side from within the same program, it's quite easy to pass the content over. Let's run this, and it's being created, so we will describe it just like we did with the data source. It says that the dataset has been created there. Now let's look at the target side UI. We see the QSCF dataset has been created here. Back to our Jupyter notebook. Let's look at doing this for analysis as well. Let's do a describe analysis API call, and then we will use the information derived from there to make a template out of this. So this data that's returned here will have information as to what data sets are being used by this analysis, what theme is being used, so on and so forth. We'll utilize that information about the data set in this create template call. Template is a point-in-time snapshot of the analysis. So when making this create template call, we are telling QuickSight, take a snapshot of the analysis's current state, and then within that you're using one data set, replace that with a placeholder. So from the source analysis response, I'm taking this data set that's specified here, and I'm asking QuickSight to call it as dataset 1 in this template. So I'll go ahead and run this create template. We can see that the template creation is in progress. We will next describe it to make sure whether it got created or not. So we see here that the template has been created, and let's look at the version, and let's look at the dataset configuration in there. Like I mentioned here, now the dataset ARN is no longer mentioned. It's taken the placeholder value, and then it has the schema, what all columns from this dataset is being used within the analysis. When we use this template later on to plug in a different data set, QuickSight will cross-check if that data set has got these columns, and if it has got the columns which are needed, it will be able to plug in that data set. We will describe the theme on the source side. So here we can see that this theme was based on the Seaside starter theme, and if we look under configuration, we can see that the primary background and secondary background colors have been changed. Now using all this information, we can create a theme into the target account using create theme API call. So that's what I'm doing here, and in that I pass in the theme name and the base theme as well as the configuration. So let's run that. It says creation in progress. As before, we'll describe this theme to make sure it got created correctly. We're seeing that status code 200, and then under theme we see the theme has been created. The theme is not directly visible in the UI till that analysis comes in, so we will go ahead and get the analysis created, then we will make sure to check this out from the UI of the target account as well. We will get the permissions applied on the source side analysis here, and then ahead of creating the analysis on the target side, we replace the account ID used in the principal with the target account ID. We use the create analysis API call. Herein we pass in the template that we created on the source account, and as under dataset references we specify the placeholder dataset1, and then we say replace that with the target datasets ARN. So we have this ARN from the prior API call which we made to create the dataset into target site, so I'm directly referencing the ARN from there. Let's run this. Again, creation in progress. We'll describe it to make sure. Creation successful. Let's look at the analysis from the UI. If I click into the analysis of the target side, I see that one object has been created here. If I click the analysis, I can launch that, and I can see the content just like it was on the source side. That's looking good. We'll take a similar approach for the dashboard as well. So first let's describe the dashboard on the source side. We'll get the permissions applied on the dashboard, and then using the responses from both of those API calls, swapping the account ID for the target, we will utilize the create dashboard API call, and we are again using the source template and providing the target data set to replace the placeholder. We are also passing in the theme, target theme that we created, and the permissions that we got from the prior API call. So let's run that. It says dashboard is being created. We'll describe it. So dashboard has been created now, and let's look at it from the target side UI. Before we go into the dashboard, let's look at the analysis ones, because we had applied the theme here, right? So we can see that the QSCF theme has been created and it has been applied to the analysis. We'll see the same theme is applied on the dashboard too. So clicking into dashboard, I see the dashboard object here. Let's open that up. Yeah, so we see dashboard is now available and functioning on the target QuickSight account, and it's set up with the correct theme too. So that covers porting content from one QuickSight account to the other using our APIs. I did this using a Jupyter notebook just so that I can run it in parts, show the responses in between. You can easily put this all into a continuous program, run it from say Lambda or your own choice of compute, and you can customize it to best suit your needs. Hope I was able to give you some useful info, and this was good use of your time. Have a nice day ahead.